Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Grace of Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Dawn, who is a Air Force brat, Air Force service member, veteran herself, and then also spouse. So all around military. But Dawn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, Grace. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to be able to touch on every single portion of your life and how it's related and everything. But start by telling us about your experiences growing up as a military child and how that shaped you.
Well, I was born at a military hospital. It's a base that's since closed, as many of them have, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at a base called Kincheloe Air Force Base. My dad was a 20-year-old straight out of tech school in the Air Force, and he went up there as his very first base. And he met my mom, who was living in the town near the base, and they got married and had me. And about 6 months after I was born, they headed back to California. And this is in the early 60s or mid 60s. So the one thing he was really concerned about was, of course, Vietnam. It was going on and it was heating up a lot. And my dad's cousin had recently been drafted and sent over to Vietnam, and he lasted maybe 2 weeks before
Wow.
something really unfortunate happened to him and he died. And it devastated his family so much. So, of course, my dad's parents were very worried. Here he is, a young boy. He was about that time 21 and had a new daughter and a wife. And they really were concerned he was going to be sent to Vietnam. So they convinced him to get out and work as a government contractor at McClellan Air Force Base. And that's what he did. And then my sister came along and they bought a house it was near Sacramento, and everything was fine. And my dad pretty much he'd put a lot of stuff on his plate. He was going to school at night. He wanted to be a teacher. And he was also working as a government contractor at McClellan during the week. And on weekends, he was working at my grandfather's gas station. He had a gas station in Roseville, California. And he was doing this, and it was a lot. And then my sister came along. And my dad just couldn't keep up. He was like, "I need more security for my family. I can't keep up the 3 jobs." My mother was having health problems. So he decided to make the decision and weigh his risks, and he was gonna rejoin the Air Force and, keep his fingers crossed that he didn't get sent to Vietnam. So he did that, and we were immediately stationed at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. And we were there for, I would say, about a year. And then he got his orders to go to Vietnam. And so it was, a pretty scary time. I was just still, I think I was in first grade. So I wasn't really understanding what was happening. And how this all happened was my sister and I, we were just talking about things that had happened in our past. And she would remember some things, but I remembered a lot more because I was the oldest. So I thought, I'm going to write all this stuff down so that, she has it one day. So I started writing it down. And then I thought, I'm going to write a book. So I have written a book. It's called We Followed the Drum. And following the drum, I don't know if a lot of people are familiar, is kind of a really old-fashioned way of saying all the people and families and friends who followed their soldiers as they went and did their work, whether it was to war or everything, and they just followed them. So we did follow the drum. We went with my dad everywhere but Vietnam, and he was in Turkey for a while. So he goes to Vietnam and he's there. My mother is pregnant and she has a very difficult pregnancy. So now he's got 3 girls, and now she's pregnant with another high-risk pregnancy, and she had my brother who was very sick. My dad came home for Vietnam on compassionate leave for, I think, a week or so, and then they shipped him back to finish his tour. And thank goodness, he survived it. But I think it changed him a lot, very much. He wasn't on the front lines. He worked on a flight line in a more protected area, but still, he had a whole different experience of his life than he had from the time he was 20 years old and had started in the military with no family and wife. Now he had a family to take care of. After Vietnam, we were stationed at Mather, and then we went to Turkey, which I think I was 9 years old when we went to Turkey. I'd never even heard of the place. was a huge culture shock for me and my family. My mom was a
Yeah.
small town girl, only been in California and then Delaware, and now she's going to a country that was so, different religion, different culture, language, everything was different. And we went there and we did a tour. I think it was about 3 years. I think it was 2 to 3 years. And then we got shipped to Minot, North Dakota, another very different place. And we were there for 2 years. And then we went back to Turkey. My parents loved it so much once they got used to the Turkish experience. They wanted to go back. So we all went back. And then after that, we were there about 4 years. My dad got stationed to Williams Air Force Base, which has since closed, in Arizona outside Phoenix. And that's where I went to high school and graduated from high school. So I was a military brat. My brothers and sisters were. And then I got married to a military member, someone in the National Guard in New York. And I was up there. So it wasn't a big difference. I was used to moving. My whole family, every time, 2 years goes by, we all get a little antsy, like, isn't it time we should be moving on? And I've heard some of
Right.
on your other podcasts, that was the thing. It's like time to move. We become gypsies. We just get used to it. And so I was in New York and we were only married for 7 years, but he did a lot of TDYs. And sometimes I would go and, kind of sponge off the vacation aspect while he was working or wherever he was. And then when I got out, I went to finish my degree. I became a nurse. And I really missed that experience of being a military member. And so I decided once I graduated, I was going to sign up. So I got a commission into the Air Force and immediately was stationed in Texas at Lackland Air Force Base at Wolford Hall, which was, I'd been through Texas before, but never lived there. I really enjoyed it. I didn't get into the Texas culture much because I was working all the time. I
Yeah.
worked as a labor and delivery nurse, so delivering babies to military members. A lot of fun experiences. It makes you quite able to handle anything that gets thrown your way, working in those types of environments. And then I moved to Germany, where I was stationed at Bitburg Spangdahlem. Bitburg had pretty much closed. There were parts of the housing area that were still open. And the hospital, which was, people would laugh when they would see the hospital. That's the hospital. It looked like a bunker from World War II that was actually dug into a pit. And I worked there for, 4 years. I loved Germany. It was amazing. I found out after I left Germany that they had discovered some unexploded ordnance under the hospital. After
Wow.
I left, they had to close the hospital down and I guess excavate, but which is a common thing in the Rhineland area of Germany. So that was kind of interesting. I worked when I was in Turkey with the German Red Cross. It's a small hospital. When we had something big that needed to go to the Krankenhaus, which was the German hospital, or all the way back to Landstuhl or Ramstein, we had to get an ambulance, find somebody to drive it, and throw a nurse in the back. If we could, we'd find a German paramedic to join us, but they weren't always available. And we would take them to wherever they needed to be. Whether it was Trier, where they had the mother hospital for the maternity patients and the nursery for the babies, or all the way to Landstuhl or Ramstein. So it was an adventure that it was amazing. And I got to see what it was like being an active duty member as in opposition to what I had experienced as a military brat. When you're a military brat, you know kind of what your parent is doing. You have an idea. But you're not there doing the work, and the military hierarchy comes to you through, dad or mom or whoever the member is. This way I got to understand all the little working parts, all the requirements. And one thing I had always known, it was unquestioned in our family growing up, was that um, the military mission is the biggest priority. It comes even before family. The military is doing a lot of really great things for families now, but it wasn't always that way. Back in the day, the 70s, the 60s, and the 80s, when I was a brat, there weren't a lot of family resources. There was the
Right.
school, there was mental health on the hospital, and there were some different clubs and things and help groups, but not like they have today. Like now they have Fisher House, they have many different things, and back then they didn't have it. So if your family was in crisis, as ours sometimes was in crisis, there wasn't a lot of places you could go. And if you did utilize the resources that were available to you, um, they were if they didn't work for you, if they weren't helping you, there weren't a lot of other things. And if you were overseas, they would, recommend that you go back to the stateside where there were more things that you could use, social services outside the military. So, being a military member, I got to see the working parts, and I got to be part of that as a nurse at the hospital, and a small hospital. You do everything. I wasn't just helping to deliver babies and, working nights and days and weekends and holidays. I was also working in the surgical portion, the GI portion, the med surge, taking care of the babies. We had a little nursery. It wasn't anything high tech, but we could, do what we needed to do for the babies, do hearing tests and things. Um, we also had to, be available to be self-sufficient for unexpected things would happen. People would come in the middle of the night bleeding or, losing their baby. And we had to be able right then and there to take it all on while we were in contact with the doctor who wasn't always in the hospital. They might be out in a village somewhere, and we might be in blackout conditions with, black ice on the roads and a snowstorm. And we'd call them and they'd say, I'll be there as soon as I can get there. And we'd have to handle everything. And it could get scary, but you learn really fast
Yeah.
to educate yourself and to respond. And also, we were required as our part of our other duties was to be lactation consultant, teach the childbirth classes, teach the new families that were coming onto the base, especially the ones who were expecting babies, how it was going to work at the hospital, what our
Right.
requirements were for them. Like, okay, you need to sign up here and get your doctor and start your clinic appointments. We're going to have classes. You need to attend those. We'll give you a tour of the hospital. We'll talk about all the things that you and your family can expect from us. And, stuff like that. And then the fun things like having the expectant dads wear the birthing suit with the weights in it so they can kind of experience what their wives are going through and make them
Yeah.
wear it through the whole class. With the whole class was sometimes over an hour, and they couldn't wait to get those suits off. So it was really fun to do that and be a part of that kind of behind the curtain stuff that you might not know is happening at the hospital, but we're there and we're ready for you. We experienced a lot of weird things. Growing up in Turkey, they had a war while we were there, the Turkish-Cyprus War. We were in blackout conditions. Our second tour, we were under martial law. We had soldiers and machine guns. There were riots and car bombings happening. We were all told to keep a low profile. And so my mother had been, stopped by soldiers who grabbed her one night. And she got, they let her go, but it was really scary for our family. We could hear planes going overhead during the first Turkish Cyprus War over the water because we were at Incirlik Air Force. It was called Incirlik Common Defense Installation. So it's not an Air Force base, U.S. Air Force base. It's a Turkish
Right.
base that we're there as a part of the NATO agreements. And we saw the Turks prepare for war. They were at war. We saw funerals going down the streets of the fallen heroes of the Turkish military. And as a kid, I didn't really know, but thinking back on it, I was like, wow, now I understand. I understand. And my sister and I talk about it like, do you remember we were the weekend that the Turkish Cyprus War broke out, we were all planning to do something that my family hardly ever did, which was go camping at the rec facility on Adana Lake. And they had a little American camping place. So we went there and the war started. We could hear them talking about it on the radio. But then we had to put out our campfires because they said everything is going to be blackout conditions. they might bomb if we don't want to give them any landmarks. So we're in our tents, we put our fire out, which as a kid, I was 10 years old, I thought was a real bummer. But you can hear planes. You don't know whose planes they are. You don't know where they're going or what they're doing.
Right,
And, as a kid, you're really resilient. You go, okay, that was last night. The next day, you're out in the lake with your friends. But you learn really fast as you see these things happening. And then you hear other people talking. This is not normal operating day. This is exceptional. So then there was an embargo. So they stopped our mail. They allowed a little bit of mail come in from the States, but no, no supplies, no packages, nothing. And for us, we didn't have Skype and Zoom and cell phones. We wrote letters. That's how we communicated with our families back in the States. And a phone call to a family member in the States. We got in 2 tours, I'd say about over 6 years, we got one phone call. We were able to make one phone call to my grandparents, and that was an exceptional circumstance. And it was just crazy because nowadays people can be on a aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf and they can still communicate with their family and see their kids and talk to them. We didn't
right,
have that back then. My grandmother at one time sent a little cassette tape that she and my grandfather had made and sent it to us, and it got through, and we were all sitting around the dining room table just listening to our grandparents on the recorder, just totally loving to hear their voice again. And it was like it was surreal in some ways. And but now things are changed and the communication's much better. So that's a great thing. So I did my time, I did 7 years in the active duty military and remarried an Air Force. He was former active duty member and he was in the National Guard in Washington. And so he had 3 kids, he was a widow, and having had a military brat experience, which I loved, my family loved it. We understood that your friends are gonna leave and you'll get new friends. We would miss our friends and be sad about that, but we never thought it was unusual. To us, that was normal. Changing schools, changing friends, saying goodbye to our house and finding another house that may or may not be as nice or a home. Sometimes we lived in a trailer, which was horrifying, but once you've lived in a Turkish trailer that came from, I think it was Willis Air Force Base in Libya that was being repurposed in Turkey, that had holes in it and it had a roof built over it because it leaked so much. You appreciate anything else you get that's better than that. And
yeah,
everything's better than that, you know? Um, but having done that and knowing that we loved it, we loved it. I also knew because I had civilian friends and they couldn't imagine leaving their friends and their schools and their families. So when I married my husband, he had 3 little kids, all under the age of 8, and they had lost their mother, and they belonged to a church and a school. They had never moved. I really had to think about it. We discussed whether I should stay in and he should join me, or if it would be better for the kids if I got out. So I decided to get out. I thought this is too much to put the kids through if they're not used to this. So I got out and I joined the National Guard up at Camp Murray, McCord Camp Murray, and I did that for a few years. And it was a really long commute. I had a 2-hour drive each way. So I finally decided after a couple years, I'm just going to be a nurse now. I'm just going to go out there and be a civilian nurse. And my kids were thriving at that point. They have no they had no military experience, moving, and all those other things. And I think that they were really, really civilian kids. Once I I got out and I became a civilian nurse, there was another huge culture shock because I had been a military nurse, completely different than a civilian nurse. Now I had to deal with unions and being a union member, and then I was a manager, so dealing with unions and a lot of things that as a military member you don't even question. I was told, I worked every 2 weeks. I worked 7 shifts, so those were my clinical nursing shifts, and they could be days or they could be nights. They did a rotation, And sometime you would also pull call. So you'd be on call. So you'd be called in on your day off if they needed you. But also you had your duties during the day, your military officer duties. And that might require you after pulling in night shifts to stay for commander's call or meetings. And you're exhausted at this time and you're trying to stay awake. And then you have to drive yourself home through the German countryside very slowly on it was called the B50. It's a very dangerous road between Bitburg and where I lived in Spangdahlem, and then report for work the next day, no matter what weather, no matter what's going on. I was in Turkey during 9/11, and I had just gotten off the night shift. I was scheduled to go to Brooks in Texas for some training. They knew something was ramping up. Nobody said anything. They did send out these cryptic messages on your email, your work email, saying, if you have loved ones or you're planning on vacationing in any of the STAN countries, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, any of the STAN countries, cancel your plans. That's all they told us. And I was like, well, I don't know anybody there. I'm not planning on vacationing in Afghanistan or Pakistan. And it went on for a few weeks. They would send out these messages, but nobody knew what it was about. And then boom, 9/11 happened. I had gotten off the night shift and I went home and I got a call as soon as I got home before I fell asleep. Oh, you're not going to Brooks anymore. You're going to be staying here. We're sending somebody else in your place. And I was like, okay, I don't know why. I don't question it. I didn't think about it. I was tired. I wanted to go to sleep. I had to work that night.
Right.
So went to sleep and I woke up and I was getting ready for work. I had my uniform on. Um, and a friend called me, a German friend, and said, hey, did you hear something? And he would call me all the time and ask me strange things about America. And like I had an inside track being an American. And he goes, I just heard that some planes went into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, oh, that can't be right. I go, that's probably a rumor. I said, because if it was true, it would be on CNN. And I turned on CNN and there it was. And I was like stunned. I was like, oh my God, this changes everything. We're going to be at war. I got to get to work right now.
Yeah.
So after a few minutes of just looking at the news reports and kind of letting it sink in, jumped in my car and went to the base, and the base was locked down. They had soldiers everywhere, unlike anything I had seen before. I mean, we had security before, but this was crazy. There was a line of cars to get into the base. They had closed all but one base at Bitburg, and the line just went all the way around the base. So I got in line and I got in, and everybody is just watching the television. We could not believe it. And we thought, oh my God, are they going to be bringing, if we're at war, are they going to be bringing casualties here as opposed to Landstuhl and Ramstein? Because we could be activated as like a frontline hospital. And we'd all trained for this, but we didn't know. And we waited and waited. A couple of months later, we actually did get a call from our commander who came on the floor and said, hey, be aware, we might be diverting some casualties from Landstuhl. They're pretty full right now. But it didn't happen. But we were ready. We were poised to jump on that. So after 9/11 and everything changed in the military after that. I used to go like on the weekend when I first got to Germany, my commander said, oh, you're going to enjoy this assignment. It's wonderful. And on the weekends, when you're not on call, you can go to Paris for the weekend. You can go to Amsterdam. You can do all these great, wonderful things. And I was like, yeah. And I totally enjoyed that. But after 9/11, they wanted to know where you were at all times. You had to have orders, for doing anything, leaving the area. So it really did change, I think, permanently, the military and how military members, were. I'd gone from the Cold War, where my dad was always preparing for war with the Soviet Union, always doing exercises, always locking the base down and stuff. But it was exercise. When you're walking across the base with your friends and you hear those air sirens go off and you have to get down in a ditch or that, it was an exercise. It wasn't real. It might be real one day, but my dad never, except for Vietnam. I mean, they were just ready. They were war ready, war preparedness, they called it. But all of a sudden at 9/11, and we'd already had Desert Shield in Kuwait, but we thought that was pretty much over. We just needed to go find the bad guys, but there wasn't going to be another one. So this changed everything. So that was one of the things I took into consideration when my kids, I got married and the kids, should we uproot them and take them around the world? Now my kids are, they're out of college. If I were to do it again, I would have stayed in and I would have taken them and said, this is your new life, enjoy it. And I think they would have loved it because two of my children have gone into the Navy and they loved it. And they're still in. One is still in, another has just gotten out. But I think they really thrived and they got to experience the world as, military members themselves. They learned to follow rules and instructions. And we're pretty strict as parents. We wanted things a certain way. And my dad was strict. He, your mission is first when you're a military member, not family. Family second. Yes, we're going to take care of the family, but the only reason why you're employed with the military is to prepare for war and defending our country. So my kids got to experience that, and maybe they understood a little bit why my husband and I were always like, the work comes first. Yes, we love you, but this is what we're doing. And um, the two of them that went in totally get it now. And they really, and they benefited so much from joining the military. They get the benefits. They got to travel and to meet other military members and learn new skills and be appreciated and make good money and get the GI Bill and get VA loans. So I told them, I go, the best thing you can do when you're a young person, if you don't have something planned, you don't quite know what you want to do, try the military. They'll test you, they'll see what you're good at. And even if you decide not to stay in after a few years, you will have that experience and some of those benefits, which they absolutely love. They love that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's such a good thing to put on your resume and be able to have and carry with you.
Mhm. And getting that, knowing that your job comes first. And as a nurse, I would go to work and I would say a little prayer every time I was on my way to work. Please let me not mess up today. Please let me not hurt anybody. Let me help somebody. Let me be, on point with all of my skills so that I, can offer the value that I've been trained to give. But then on
Right.
top of that, it's the military thing. It's not like I don't feel like coming to work today. I've worked shifts where I had pneumonia and I wore a mask and I relied on my team. I said, I'm going to go into the on-call room and take a nap so that I don't pass out. Call me if you need me, if you see this, this, or this, and give them a little brief and then go take a little half an hour nap and they come get you and you go check again. And you knew your team had you. If you needed them, I'm going to work this shift, even though I really should be in one of the hospital beds, but I'm going to make it happen because there's nobody else. And I don't want to call somebody else off at home to come in when they're enjoying their valuable and rare family time or their time off. So you learn to make work your priority. And that's really helped me as a civilian nurse too, because it's like, got to work going in. I'm a professional and this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter what's going on in my personal life. This is what we're doing. And I think that's a really good thing for kids to see professionalism and reliability and know that, this is, you're a good person. You have strong morals and character, and you're going to help other people, which is why I went into nursing in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, what piece of advice would you give to another military child who's, like, going through this stuff and, seeing different things? And I know times have changed, but what would you tell another military child?
Well, first of all, I would say enjoy it. Enjoy these times. They sometimes seem really rocky and you get scared and you don't see your parents a lot, but they're providing a life for you and they're providing an opportunity for you to experience something um, that is very valuable, a bigger and wider perspective of the world and people and what they do and how they can work as a team. Military forces are a team. They all work together in conjunction. You've got your Navy, your Army, your Marines, Air Force. They all work together. Coast Guard, I could go on and on,
Yeah.
but you you have to understand that everybody's going to pull together to help each other. And you really see it when bad things are happening, how we do pull it together. There's those one-off people who kind of, freak out. I remember on 9/11, that night when I was working, people were calling panicked and crying. One lady was crying because she didn't have any diapers. And I'm like, she goes, I need to come to the hospital and get diapers. And I'm like, well, I only have newborn diapers to offer you. And your
Right.
baby sounds a lot bigger, but what would you do if 9/11 hadn't happened and you ran out of diapers? What would you do then? I said, you have to think about that. Don't put this in the forefront of your mind. Just continue what you're doing. Carry on, because that's what we do. But we're there to talk people out of a tree. We're there to calm people down and to just reassuringly go about our business to make sure that everyone has what they need and to help out. We had several military members who were on leave in the States when 9/11 happened, and they couldn't get back. So we were short staffed. So we just covered their shifts. We just did the work. And when they came back, they were very apologetic. And it's like, don't be apologize. Wasn't your choice. This was out of your hands. And we all work together. We're a team. So my advice would be enjoy your time in the military, whether you go overseas or not. If you do go overseas, you're really in for a treat because you're going to be challenged and you're going to see things that to an American doesn't make sense. And you're going to figure it out and just be open to new experiences and know that this might be one of the best times of your life. I belong to a lot of social media groups based on military child, military brats, alumni at the various military bases and hospitals and things and schools. And the one thing that I always see, and which also was a reason why I wrote my book, We Followed the Drum, was that these people, they're my age, they're going into being an elder, and I don't like to say that I'm an elder yet, but I am right on the cusp. And they're still talking about the friends they made, the places they saw. They're posting pictures of when they were in high school in 1980 or 1977 and talking about the friends that they're looking for that they lost track of. And some of them, it was life changing. My husband, who is a Danish American, he's half Danish, half American. He grew up in Brazil. His father was not a military member, but he worked for US Steel and he lived in Brazil. My husband, now as a former active duty officer, still talks about, how life changing it was to live in Brazil when he was an adolescent. So I
Right.
think that military children who get that opportunity to travel and meet people, they should just think in the moment. One day they're really going to wish they were right where they are with their friends and family, experiencing what their life is giving them as a military dependent, a brat. And I think that for a lot of them, it's going to be like the best thing that ever happened to them. So enjoy it is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can listeners find you, connect with you, read your book, everything like that?
Yeah, my website is dawnlaundrupbooks.com. And my email is dawn@dawnlaundrupbooks.com. And on my website, of course, I'm featuring my book, We Followed the Drum, but I've got reviews of books that I have particularly enjoyed, some of them written by military brats. One I'm reading right now, a military brat who grew up in Spain in the 1960s. It's really fascinating. And then others, the military brats are in the States, traveling around, talking about their experiences. Some I read them and I'm like, oh my God, this is just like our family. And
Right.
so I've got reviews of those, and I'm also starting a blog. So I'm just talking about my experiences, things I learned, some of the crazy things. I mean, my mom got involved with a spy in Turkey. She did not know it. It was a Soviet spy. My dad found out in a really scary way when the OSI called him to their office in the middle of a workday. So, and then we, of course, were experiencing the martial law, the war. Um, you know, Someone tried to grab my sister once off the street, and a little blonde girl, in Turkey in the 1970s. We didn't know about, we called it back then, it's an old fashioned term, white slavery. but, now we have other terms for it, so, but these things were happening. Sometimes we had near misses we weren't even aware of until after the fact that, oh my God, the lady who now lives in our apartment and parks her car in the spot we used to park it, her car got blown up. I mean, it's like, wow, that could have been us.
Right.
And then, more of the mundane and humorous things of traveling with 4 kids and a dog who's not very well trained in a station wagon from New York to California to North Dakota to Arizona and going to Turkey. I mean, just crazy things that happen, which I am sure every military kid has something like that that's happened. Like, they're like, "Really? We have to endure this? Dad, can you stop the car? Can we all get out and stretch our legs and maybe get a bite to eat?" And dad's like, "No, got to keep going, got to get to that next base. I've only got so much time before, my orders end. So
Yeah.
it was, I would say, military kid, even if it seems crazy and your dad won't stop the car and he's driving, the only time he stops the car is to get gas so you can run to the bathroom and get back in the car before he's finished filling up. It's kind of universal for many kids. And my dad was enlisted, and there were 4 of us, so we were living on a shoestring most of the time, and, just crazy things we did. Military kids, just enjoy those times because you're gonna laugh at them. If you have siblings, it's gonna be the best family stories, like, remember when, and you're gonna enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Dawn, so much for coming on the podcast and sharing about your life of being a military kid and all the way up through how you joined and the service you had yourself.
Thank you so much, and I love your podcasts. I've been watching them. Keep doing this. It's
Thank
so
you.
valuable for people and to see the different perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Gracie.